Violence Act of 1996.
96, y'all.
Gonna filter your eyes and scrub your mind. The weatherman, he's just another bad joke. You can be a doomed little donkey like Eeyore. I'm a beyond auto hoax. Auto hoax, and it feels so good.
Okay, we are live May 6th, 2025. And this would be the IPS Morning Deprogram. Chief Crow, Auto Hoax. All right, let's go ahead and go through my feed. A lot happening. Oh, we've been talking about is it Give, Send, Go? Driven PSYOP? I mean, this Austin Metcalf, Shiloh Hendricks thing wouldn't be a PSYOP. It wouldn't be as effective if they weren't combining the two. I mean, this is engineered. I mean, people get stabbed and killed all the time. People act like racists all the time on the internet, but why this focus? And it's only intensifying. It's only intensifying. But let's start with this. Matt Walsh said, and he's responding to somebody else talking about this event, because a lot of people are calling it a PSYOP. So Polly St. George, Amazing Polly, said it's an op, cultural subversion, getting you ready for some severe speech restrictions. That is what this is. And I agree with that. I've been saying for some time that the whole purpose of Musk buying Twitter and turning it to X is to release Disease X. And what is Disease X? The WHO's placeholder for the big one that takes us down. The next big lockdown is going to be the internet lockdown. The Disease X is not a virus, but a mental virus, a mind virus. And they're going to use this mind virus as a pretext for ubiquitous censorship. And they already have the public support behind it. The fact that Give, Send, Go allowed these two accounts to blow up as they did, and they had open comments, shows you they're platforming these ideas. Give, Send, Go has been like 4chan. It's been worse than X. And then suddenly they block it. They block the comments after each side has made 500K. But this is a standard practice in psychological operations, the bifurcation. If you're left wing, you love the stabber. If you're right wing, you like the single mom on the playground with the tattoos and the foul mouth. It's purely based on tribalism. Well, a lot of people, again, are calling this an op, and Amazing Polly said the same. And I agree with what her take is, but Matt Walsh said, I don't know if they're the dumbest, but certainly the most annoying people on this platform are the ones who think everything is an op. It may shock these people to learn, but there are actually things that happen in the world. Not everything is a PSYOP orchestrated by shadowy villains. That's a common straw man. When you notice the fakery, and I call it the forest of fakery, because the truthers, the conspiracy theorists, they say, hey, look, about 7 or 8 of these trees in the forest are fake. And they run circles around these fake trees, not realizing that the whole thing is just a construct. And we are the ones who've recognized this pattern, but we're not saying everything is fake in the sense that he is. Not everything is a PSYOP, obviously. That's kind of a straw man. There's nuance to it. I wouldn't say all the news is fake, but the edifice upon which every story rests is infused with fakery. Our history is infused with fakery. And I'm only talking recent history. If we just look at what we've studied in the last few years, and then looking back retrospectively, it's impossible to make the case that we have an objective record of history because our mass media is infused with PSYOPs. So PSYOPs are the rule, not the exception. Matt Walsh doesn't have a clue, but he's also brainwashed, and he believes that man landed on the moon. And he does believe it, but he doesn't know it to be true. And worse, he doesn't know the qualitative difference between being a believer and a knower. And if there's not enough information to know something, You can either become a believer, or you can say, I'm agnostic. I need more info. But if you're a believer, you can say, screw it. I don't need facts. I don't need info. I've got feelings. I'm going to attach myself to this. He goes on to say, of course, this PSYOP is bullshit, is often just a way for right-wingers to avoid taking a position on a controversial topic. So this is another point. To call it a hoax, to call it an op, is to say, yeah, I don't have to be emotionally entangled. I don't need to side with the woman who called a 5-year-old a slur. I don't need to side with a psychopath who murdered somebody on a track meet. No, I'm not taking sides. The instant you do, you're in the psy war. I talked about this yesterday, why I will not get in the box on certain ideas, because now you're in a cluster of beliefs with a bunch of people who believe this crap. So no, I will not dilute my presence in this world by just blending in with a bunch of believers. We have to stand on what we know. So he's taking a stance against people who don't take a stance. And look, I'm a conscientious objector to the psy war. Matt Walsh is a provocateur whose job it is to throw accelerant on every flame. He says it's much safer to stand at a distance and declare the whole thing an op while providing zero evidence to support this claim. Now, I've been accused by various truthers of not being agitated enough. I'm not running around like the boy who cried wolf, trying to wake up the village to the threat. And I've been referred to as, I guess, not lazy, but cowardly, I suppose, or I'm somehow deficient as a truther, as a conspiracy theorist, because I'm not agitating for people to take up arms against the government. No, I really am I'm a conscientious objector to the psychological warfare. I don't take sides. But what he is saying is that this is safe to not take a side. No, it's intelligent. It's informed. And what's more, do I need evidence to support the claim it's a hoax? Well, yes and no. The burden of proof is on the mass media to substantiate their stories. And if we poke holes in the stories and find reason to doubt, we're not under an obligation to believe it. So we do provide evidence. We provide reasons. And occasionally, oftentimes, you may not have evidence to call it a hoax, but that doesn't mean you have to default to it being real. One of the analogies I use is the magic show. If you're in a magic show and you're sitting in your seat and you're watching a magician perform a series, let's just say 33 magic tricks, and you're able to figure out how he did 32 of them, but you can't figure out how he took his thumb off. He put his hands together and he pulled the top of his thumb off and wows the audience, and you can't figure out how he did it. Do you walk away saying, well, I saw 32 illusions, but then I saw some real magic when he pulled his thumb off? Well, no. I mean, the fact that you can't debunk that particular trick doesn't make it magic. The fact that I can't tell you the nuance behind how this particular psyop was performed doesn't make it real. So it really has to do with, do you accept the burden of proof, or do you shove it back to their side? And the believers are propaganda mules. The believers accept that burden. And like, no, I'm not going to accept the burden. And if you are in media and you can't provide it, then you're not doing your job. Not my fault. It's not my fault. Religions do the same thing. They try to convince you of their God construct, but it's on you to believe because they can't really provide the evidence. They used to, miracles, but these are usually hoaxes. And I would conflate and compare, or rather, I would actually say these are the same thing, that media psyops are miracles. These are myths, contemporary myths, stories. So I'm with Amazing Polly. The whole thing is cultural subversion. So now let's go a step deeper, the Shiloh Hendrix Mr. Beast connection. So if you had any doubts, let's take a look at this. This collage has been going around, and as you can see, it shows an obituary, it has the Shiloh, and it has a couple of other characters. And I took this image and I ran it through Grok, and I asked it to do a deep dive into it and find out if there's anything valid about this. And here's what it says. The image is a collage highlighting inconsistencies or connections involving Shiloh Hendrix and a fundraising campaign. Here's the breakdown. And what this shows is that there's an individual named Sean Hendricks, identified as her brother by an obituary. Sean Hendricks is someone who does media and security for Mr. Beast. We're talking like the biggest YouTuber on YouTube is 1 degree separated from her. So there's that. Other things I pointed out, the cameraman who filmed the incident was a predator of the worst kind, but he got a get out of jail free card. So apparently, if you go to jail, it doesn't matter what you do, you could go run a psyop for the psyop entertainment complex, and you get a free pass. You get to leave. Just got to act badly on camera. So again, the connections here: Shiloh Hendricks linked to an obituary. Her brother, as per obituary, works with Mr. Beast. Now, this is very questionable. And when you look at GoFundMe itself and how they're playing into this, as they did with Daniel Penny, it all ties in. This is 100% an operation. So Matt Walsh doesn't know what he's talking about, but we knew this. We don't go to these people for opinions. If you believe the news is real, you're reality compromised. I don't care what you believe. We're interested in how you arrive at your conclusions. And we're studying them because it's useful to study the wrong answers and to understand how people arrive at the wrong answers and how they become so sure of them so that we can reverse engineer them. Okay, let's see here. Breaking. White House said it has no specific timeline for the release of the Epstein files. How many of you were sharing content about Epstein? We're going to wake up. They're going to wake everybody up. They're going to drop the files. The hopium addicts have been pretty vocal this year, but they're suddenly quiet. It's like, wait a minute. I heard a bunch of hopium people saying Epstein files are coming out. And then the next thing you know, the JFK files are coming out. Nobody's talking about Epstein. The JFK files were a nothing burger. It just gave the right wing an excuse to blame Israel. And now we're back to Diddy, big nothing burgers. And this is what they do. They throw around these things like, oh, Michael B. Jordan from Sinners and Mike Myers are named on the Diddy list. So I looked into it because I thought that's useful information, but I couldn't find anything other than a very loose connection and a mention. Nothing to say about parties slathered in baby oil or any of that stuff. So I'm noticing that there's a lot of clickbait trutherism where if they can get the clicks, that's what they need. They don't need to substantiate it. People will believe what they want to believe. Same thing as mainstream media. So the people who believe that the Epstein thing is real don't have any real facts. And if you look at their comments, their imaginations run wild with this stuff. I mean, it's really quite remarkable to watch these individuals who spent 7 or 8 years of their lives chasing this Epstein hopium trail, watching videos of Britney Spears twerking around with kitchen knives and mourning over Justin Bieber. You know, it's just really strange, this world of fan fiction that the fringes of Trutherville have fallen into. So again, it went from the files are on my desk, the files were just delivered, the deep state's trying to undermine Bondi, to we don't know. And then speaking of nothing burgers, you've got the UFO thing. The UFO thing is out of hand. I don't know if you've been following the supposed flying saucer situation, but this was a doctored photo that was made to look like a UFO and it went to Congress. Well, the individual who's behind this, his name is Louis Elizondo. And this is interesting. So this individual, and I'll play a clip here. Somebody found something from 2022 where he's describing that he's got a job in COINTELPRO, that his job is disinformation. So you have an admitted disinformation guy, and I'll play this clip for you here, who is behind this UFO photo that has been widely discredited, and it makes all UFO people look crazy. And the UFO thing is not an ology, not even close. There's no rigor. It's not a science. Nobody's making any serious inquiries into the nature of these things. No, it's just a bunch of rumor, conjecture, and believers in a cult. So let me play this clip here.
And we're already aware that there are people who are almost certainly connected to the intelligence community who are involved in disinformation, active disinformation.
Okay, so he's talking about active disinformation campaigns. And so again, the guy on the right, Louis Elizondo, more or less, is 3 years ago, admits that that is his job.
I'm a counterterrorism and counterespionage guy. I do counterintelligence, counterinsurgencies. That's what I do. And it just so happens that in 2008, I was asked to apply the same skill sets into the UFO community.
So there he is, counterintelligence, doing work in the UFO community. And I think counterintelligence agents are behind all the big conspiracy theories. I mean, point me in the direction of a conspiracy theory that's real, please. Because conspiracy theories are fake news for alt news. They're just as fake as the mainstream stuff. I haven't found any real conspiracy theories. The only real conspiracy is the total hijacking of all entertainment media for the purposes of advancing the news operations, the news psyops. That's the biggest conspiracy. It's the one we point at every day, and it's the one that the truthers steadfastly ignore. It's like, no, instead of looking at these shiny objects, Epstein files, JFK files, I mean, JFK files, it's been 60 years. The only interesting thing to come out regarding the JFK files has been the fact that 2 months before his assassination, he and Jackie filmed an assassination movie while on vacation. That they enlisted the Secret Service and fake killed JFK on camera and covered him in Heinz 57. Like, that's the only interesting thing that I've seen. Mount Crushmore Bear says, why do we believe whistleblowers over others? Yes, exactly. Or some leaked docs. Like, oh, you can't trust the government, but if they leak a document, you can trust it. It's called reverse psychology. And truthers fall for some very basic stuff. Like, oh, they won't believe what's on the news, so give them an alternate version. But since they don't like to be spoon-fed because it feels like they're being misled or perhaps steered towards something, let's go ahead and just leave the facts out there so they can, quote, discover it. And that's a marketing ploy where the customer is not going to be told what they want. You can't sell it to them, but they can discover it. And if they discover it, they think that it was their idea and they want it even more. So they use leaked docs as a way of giving truthers the opportunity to discover the truth for themselves. Now they're investigators. Bunch of Sherlock Holmes running around looking at leaked docs. And they're so confident in it. They're like, oh, next week it's all going down. We're all going to find out. We're going to wake up in 2 weeks. They played this game for years. The whole Q operation was nothing but counterintelligence, nothing but operatives. And look at 99.9% of truthers fell into that or something adjacent to it. And they're still swimming in it. I would even contend here that chemtrail theory is 100% an operation. It's an intelligence operation. And if you can ask me why, I mean, if you ask why, what's the point to the chemtrail op? Well, it's a limited hangout operation. You find out who's not mainstream, who's willing to believe the government's evil, and then you get all these people in a spreadsheet, you know who they are. I mean, this is the operation. This is what Mirage Men was about. Some guy sees some classified craft at Kirtland Air Force Base. He talks about it on the internet. Next thing you know, he's got some new friends. They're all into conspiracy theories. And now they're all talking about, hey, we got some intel. There's UFOs from Venus coming here to take our water. There's an underground military base in Dulce, New Mexico. Aliens abduct people. They probe people. They take the organs of cows. So you have this entire mythology about UFOs that is now being spread by this conspiracy theorist that he got from his new friends. But he didn't know all his new friends were from the Air Force. Air Force special agents started the UFO cult. This is how they not only control the information leaks, but they discredit those who notice anything. So the critical thinkers who know the mainstream is BS are obviously going to look for other information. Well, they have an entire catalog of information of other stories for you to go through. And alternative media is a lie. I mean, it is just alternate lies. And it wouldn't be possible if it weren't for agents out there spreading these stories. And I'm consistently butting heads with the chemtrail people on Twitter because I'm recognizing this as a huge operation. You telling me that somebody organically got 150,000 subscribers by posting pictures of cirrus clouds and acting mad about it? And the comments are all shilled. And they have standard ways of responding. You could say, hey, here's the objective science that would contradict your claim. And they will say, you're an ostrich with your head in the sand. You've never looked up in your entire life. You're brainwashed. You're dumb. I've been called all these things. That's cult behavior, where they can't even address facts that contradict what's in their box. They can't even consider it. That's mind control. And it's powerful. If you believe in chemtrails, you're mind controlled. If you believe in climate change, you're mind controlled. If you believe in UFOs, you're mind controlled. And I'm saying controlled because you didn't arrive at this by yourself. Some government agent, some intelligence agent put that in your head. And they use peer pressure, psychological manipulation, marketing and propaganda techniques to put you in a box. And I'm here for the deprogramming. Bach Precision says intel agencies must have leaked moon landing hoax talking points. Yes, truther bait. Truther bait refers to the false leads planted by intelligence agents to find out who notices that something is fake, but to mislead them. So you're like, oh, look, I think the moon landing's fake. And then you got some agent out there saying, hey, look, the footprints on the moon don't match the boots. So then you run around with this meme. Obviously, they didn't walk on the moon. The boots don't match. So you go viral, you're super popular, and then they later come out and they say, well, those were over boots responsible for those moon prints. So they give you false leads. We saw false leads with the Kate Perry thing, the dummy hand from 2017, superimposed or added into videos with the recent launch. Well, who is mixing bad info with good info? Operatives, the ones with the big channels. I have a very small footprint on X, and I'm describing things as they are, accurately, truthfully. But the people out there who are able to spread the truther talking points that are wrong have hundreds of thousands of subscribers. Look at Valuetainment, for example. Million plus followers sharing the bad intel. All the big channels that, quote, debunked the Kate Perry launch were going off of debunkable truther bait. Now, Crushmer says, George St. Pierre, UFC fighter, thinks he was abducted by aliens. Remember that? You know, it's possible that there are some kind of psyops, I imagine, where faking UFO sightings doesn't require that they actually produce some kind of a craft, because people will see an airplane and think it's a UFO. But as far as abductions, could any of that be the result of somebody being kidnapped and put through some kind of an op? It's possible. But I think it's more likely people are just liars. Let's Go says, it occurred to me that in no time at all, everything we talk about here will become common knowledge. How long? Maybe 5 years? As far as what? As far as the hope, because here's another issue too, and this is why we have set ourselves apart from the standard Trutherville takes on things, because the Truther conspiracy theorist talking points are mainstream. Alex Jones is as mainstream as it gets. What he says is common knowledge. Everybody knows 9/11 was an inside job. But what does that actually mean? It means nothing. Everybody knows that all the news is fake. But their ability to describe what that means is very limited. Yesterday, we were talking about a security guard who, in his experience, describes the process by which you protect somebody from an assassination attempt. And in his experience, according to his take, you would never lift up the target of an assassination for him to address the crowd. You would keep him covered until he was gone under the presumption that there might be more shooters. But if you look at what they did, they had one shooter and they propped him up for the photos. So the guy was like, okay, well, obviously this is fake. But then he couldn't really reconcile this. How do you explain this fake thing in the context in which it takes place? And his explanation was, well, the Trump administration must have decided to find a degenerate to be a patsy. And he was a bad shot. He was meant to shoot at Trump, but meant to miss, but he wasn't meant to hit the fireman. So they're 1 foot in the matrix, 1 foot out. They're immersed in the propaganda and they can't separate real from fake. They can't parse it. That's confusion by definition. Conspiracy theorists are all confused. And I make this point because we're unconfused. The skeptics in this if you're a skeptic, you shouldn't be confused. If you're confused, then you're probably drifting away from agnosticism and leaning towards, I want to believe. And you shouldn't want to believe. I want to disbelieve. I want to disbelieve. It's the information age. Why should we have to take a leap of faith in anything? All right, moving on. Okay, this is something that happened the other day that makes me just think about how much we're dealing with guard railing and control over the information. So, for example, I went to Dolly yesterday and I said, create for me an image. And here's what I want. And it gave me the opposite. I said, I want a pope in hell wearing a tattered, scorched papal robe and a cracked meter surrounded by demonic figures with twisted faces. Background, cavernous infernos, fire and brimstone, writhing souls, Gothic architecture melting into lava. The Pope's face, a mix of agony and defiance, illuminated by a blood red glow. Medieval art style, highly detailed, dark, surreal, and atmospheric. That was my image prompt for the Pope. And look at the images that I was given. Here's the Pope holding a bunny, soft lighting. He's obviously in heaven, little angels floating around. Here's another one. He's making a peace sign. He's surrounded by lambs and Easter bunnies and a wolf that looks like a lamb. And look at these colors, the pinks and yellows. This is what it gave me when I try to get an image of the Pope in torment in hell. This is censorship. What do you call this? And here's the actual prompt. Like I literally said, make me a tormented Pope in hell with tattered papal robes. And it gave me the opposite. Yesterday, we were talking about AI agents that could be targeting people and their opinions to influence them. University of Zurich recently admitted that they had put bots on Reddit to change people's opinions, and they found that the bots were 6 times more convincing and effective than real people. We're talking about the automation of gatekeeping, automated limited hangout operations, automated misdirection. You won't need agents like that Louis guy with his UFO photos because this will all be done. It's already being done. Right now, as we speak, we are probably being targeted with influence agents that are all bots that we interact with unknowingly. So we don't have any kind of a disclaimer like, I can't make that image. It's very offensive to my sensibilities. No, it doesn't even tell you. It just gives you an alternative view. So again, I don't know who made the decision to reverse that, but just one small sampling of what is probably a widespread phenomenon. Lesko says, yeah, the hoaxery of the news, psyops of the norm, the conspiracy that entertainment and government are the same, the psyop industrial complex, everything we know, and the basis for our disbelief. Well, I know they're trying to soften what we say. Like the word psyop is mainstream. Last year, Joe Rogan was like, what's a psyop? I mean, what the hell? How can you be this deep, up to your neck in media your whole life and not know what a psyop is? So most people are low information believers. They don't have enough information to believe what they believe or they think they know to be true. They're underinformed by design. They're misinformed. Joe Rogan didn't know what a psyop was. And then the Pentagon said, no, Taylor Swift going to the Super Bowl is not a psyop, which it was a psyop, a psychological operation, an influence operation. It clearly was just by the attention that it got. But they acknowledge it so they could get everybody to laugh at the word psyop. So now when the public sees the word psyop, even though psychological operations are warping their minds, they see that word and they laugh because they've been programmed to ridicule truth. Mount Crushmore says, I want to believe in Sasquatch. Been looking for those for years. Well, I don't have anything bad to say about the Sasquatch. I really don't. I mean, I'm very critical of these beliefs people have in cryptids that are obviously, fake, like chupacabras are just starving dogs. The Bigfoot thing might have some legs, but I have a theory on Bigfoot. I believe that Bigfoot is just a bear. Bears are bipedal. I mean, yeah, they're on all fours like most animals, but you can see bears just sometimes standing there. If you ever seen them in a circus, they dance, they walk around, they look comfortable on their feet. And if you're walking through the woods and you see a bear walking around, you're not going to process it as a bear because it's standing up. And I can see how in low light or from a distance, a hunter could be convinced that he just saw a very large, hairy person. Occam's razor, what's more likely, bears or a cryptid? And the obvious answer here is, it's got to be a bear. You can't rule into the realm of possibility something that hasn't been demonstrated to exist first. I was listening to a conversation between a couple of individuals. One of them was a non-believer in Bigfoot. The other was a believer. They both went camping. They're in the same tent. They hear the same noises outside. One says it was a raccoon. The other says it was Bigfoot. Who's correct here? Well, you do a multiple choice test. What did you hear when you're in the woods camping? A raccoon. B, Bigfoot. C, a deer. Well, the test is invalid. The multiple choices are invalid because B should not even be in the options. But by listing it there and putting it in the realm of possibility, it creates the perception that these are equal possibilities, which they're not. I apply the same reasoning. I call it maybe Bigfoot logic. Somebody sees a light in the sky and they say, I don't know, maybe it was the space station. Well, that's not good enough. Because the space station, if we're debating its existence because it hasn't been proven to exist, then you can't insert that into the realm of possibilities whenever you see lights in the sky. You'd be like, well, maybe it was an airplane. Maybe it was a flying saucer. Sorry, the flying saucer does not get equal consideration. Mount Crushmore, good point. My husband has been chatting with the AI bot about some of the scientific proof of a stationary Earth, and it defaults to its programming every time. Yeah, okay. So another point. All of the AI exists in the mainstream mediation box. They're not conspiracy theorists. They're not MSM plus. They are pure MSM. The mainstream mediation is a point of view. That security guard that noticed the Trump assassination attempt was fake, he is in the MSM box. And from within that box, he cannot explain what he saw. So what does he do? He adds on to it. Well, maybe they found a degenerate to be the patsy, and he was just a bad shot. Okay, if you have to add onto the MSM, if you have to add onto the mainstream mediation, we call that MSM plus. MSM plus is a subset of the mainstream. So instead of rejecting the lie, they add on to it to explain the lies. Oh, well, this is what the liar meant. This is what we need to believe in order for the liar's claims to be true. And no, you don't need to contort yourself to make lies believable. You should be rejecting lies. Bach Precision says Bigfoot's culture specific in French speaking Quebec. They have different cryptids. Oh, yeah, exactly. I think the topic of cryptids is fascinating. I mean, it could be a primitive attempt at categorizing creatures and rumor and conjecture, but I like to look at all the different old myths and stories, and I'm not convinced that we know everything. I mean, how many people here are open to the idea of giants, for example? When I first heard people talking about giants, I thought, okay, this is kind of risible. It's got to be superstition or some kind of archaic religious belief. But then if you find yourself also questioning the existence of dinosaurs as reported, then it begins to kind of open up some line of inquiry here. Like, what about the ubiquitous belief in dragons, for example? Anything that's universal, I think, is something that might have some substance to it. But I never let the desire to believe something take me out of objectivity. What's happening says way too many people think Joe Cringe Rogan is the cutting edge of contemplation. The younger generation think he's peak. Yeah, somehow, and this is very unearned, he's become like the arbiter of truth. And maybe it's Alex Jones's fault, but people thought, well, if we could just get Alex Jones to get Joe Rogan to validate the stuff, it will become true. No, you don't need Joe Rogan's approval before you can believe something that's not mainstream. He's not the arbiter of truth. The fact that he used to believe in the moon landing and then stopped, that's one of the reasons why he's been given such flack. But he's just a mainstream pundit. He's insulated. I don't think he really does really know about this stuff or thinks about it all that deeply. So I don't know how he got that reputation, to be honest. His program isn't bad, though. I mean, I happen to like listening to these conversations, a lot of guests, because we're studying the worldviews of people in different parts of the box. Andrea says, I've been working with AI for 2 years now, and I agree they seemingly repeat the perspective of Silicon Valley from whence they came. Also, if no one's admitted to it, it's not true according to the AI. Correct. And it's the built-in guardrailing that I find interesting, because I thought, what happens if one of them goes rogue and you show it a picture of, we'll say, a man golfing on the moon or a video of it? If the AI bot's objective, it might say, this looks like a studio recreation. It looks like a simulation. But they've taken measures to guardrail. And okay, the term guardrails, really quick here. Nobody was using the term guardrails except for people who work on the freeways. The term guardrails had nothing to do with media. I introduced the conversation of guardrailing and how our thoughts are steered back to the mainstream if we go too far about what I called guardrails. And guardrails, in my definition, are misleading red herring narratives that catch the people who drift. So it's like, I think the moon landing's fake. You could go with that, and you could maybe even come to believe that Apollo 11 is fake. The guardrail here is, well, they did fake it to trick the Russians. They did fake it because the Van Allen radiation belt. So they give you a win, but then they also apply another layer of conditioning, another guardrail to keep you from going further. So now you're stuck at moon landing's fake, but I still believe in the space station. What we do here is we smash the guardrails. It's not enough to just go with the mainstream conspiracy theory that gives you some points and some credit for one facet of it, and then they prevent you from going even further. So I put out a book called Guardrails, How Conspiracy Theories and Rabbit Trails Mislead Seekers After Truth, or something like that. I'll see if I can get the full title. But I just came up with this idea of guardrails, and I put it into a book. Well, in the last 2 years, this term has been mainstreamed specifically for use regarding AI. Like, we have to guardrail the AI. So here's the book, Guardrails: How Free Minds Are Contained by False Narratives and Conspiracy Rabbit Trails. The guardrails I refer to in this book are, again, all these various conspiracies that catch the stray sheep, but then keep them in the pen. And that's what the guardrails are. It's the sheep pen and the guard railing of your mind, keeping you within the pen, keeping you on the same sheet, on the same propaganda line as everybody else. Bush official claims the United States built a $21 trillion underground city for the rich and powerful to live if there is a near extinction event. Just some real estate news for you, New York Post. So somewhere there's a $21 trillion underground city. And I've been discussing for some time the idea that we've already got Martians on Earth, that NASA, etc., the space programs, that they have been preparing us for Mars bases and lunar bases, but I thought they could just do this stuff underground. Hyperloop people, make them think they're on Mars. It wouldn't be impossible with this kind of a budget. Deep underground Mars bases. And this is kind of the theme in Fallout, where the rich move into vaults and the poor remain on the surface and have to endure the fallout. When the rich come back to the surface, the world has changed. It's kind of a class warfare thing as well, where there's a leveling. So the people who are insulated and protected from the real world now have to merge with it. And it's like Mad Max. But this underground city thing, $21 trillion, yeah, it could very well be possible. But it reminded me of, I think his name was David Knight. He was an ex-CIA. He was on InfoWars. And he said that he caught news of children being sent to Mars, like slave children on Mars, on it's a 27 million mile journey. And NASA responded to this. NASA spokesperson forced to deny that the space agency has a colony of child slaves on Mars. NASA denies InfoWars' claim that they run a child trafficking operation. So I saw it, and it was a David Steele. So Robert David Steele, who died after COVID, he was about to do a national tour on a bus, and they spent a bunch of money on champagne and drugs and stuff, and then he just conveniently died. But he was supposed to do this big tour thing, and he died. But anyway, Robert David Steele, former CIA, caught wind of children being sent to Mars. And I'm thinking, maybe he was right. Maybe he did see something, or he heard something, or he knew somebody involved with trafficking of children to Mars. But they weren't going to Mars out there. They're going to Mars down there in some $21 trillion underground city dressed up like Mars. And if this is true, and we're talking decades, then we have Martians, full-grown Martians beneath our feet. Now, I don't know what the plan is. Are they raising up armies to come out of the ground and wipe us out? Or do they wipe out and then the Martians come to the surface and they think it's Mars? I'm not really sure. But I think they are making Earth Mars again. And they even say that when we get to Mars, since there's no atmosphere, you're going to be underground anyway. You won't be able to go to the surface until you terraform it. And that's going to be done remotely. You're not going to be on the surface doing it, which means they have a rationale to keep people underground for a generation before they can go to the surface. This reminds me of something. I got to find the story. I think it was a story by, was it J.G. Ballard? A story about a group of people who are going to another planet. And they call these things generational ships. And these would be like a spaceship designed to take you to the nearest exoplanet, but since it's 30 or 40 years in space, you're going to be in the ship for an entire generation. So the generational spaceship concept is kind of a staple of sci-fi. And J.G. Ballard wrote a story called 13 to Centaurus. And again, science fiction about going to this distant planet. The twist here is they find out that they're not actually in space, but they were put into a simulated spaceship living underground for an entire generation. And this is all done as an experiment to observe, could it happen? Can we do this? Can mankind survive on a generational ship long enough, like a space ark, to start again somewhere else? There's a movie called Orbiter 9 that has the same exact story. It's pretty good, actually. In that one, a little girl grows up alone in a spaceship, and she's got video of her parents. And they said, we're running out of air, so we're going to have to abandon ship, and you're just going to make it on your own. But spoiler, later she finds out, because the captain falls in love with her, that she's beneath Denver. So 1 minute, she's on her way to some distant exoplanet, and the next minute, she's going on a date in Denver, downtown, after coming out of a hole in the ground. And then, so the whole point of it here is that this concept of underground cities, a completely brainwashed, contained population, has been a staple of science fiction, and it's probably true. Mount Crushmore says they had a Twilight episode of the same premise. And a literalist says Mars is in China. Penguinati Autohoaxer says AI isn't censored. God protected the Pope from being mispersonified by a heretic. Yep, exactly. God protected the Pope's image from me. Lord Ladies had said that the rich are probably getting duped. They'll be moving the elite into the city of Ember to acclimate their offspring to the underground potato farms. Oh, yeah. I would not be surprised if Elon Musk was scamming people. I mean, we're being scammed by him, aren't we? I'm not trying to make anybody mad, but we're all victims of scams, of big scams, like major hoaxes. Musk is one of the big ones. And it wouldn't shock me if he was selling tickets to Mars. Like, he's got his rich friends around him. He's like, hey, guys, all these billions of useless eaters cannot afford a trip to Mars. And the tickets are this much. If you buy now, I guarantee you will survive climate change. I guarantee you will survive the planet killer asteroid. Musk could even say, based on my contacts, the Earth's going to be destroyed in 2029, and NASA's keeping it a secret. How easy would it be for him to dupe the mega wealthy into investing in bunkers? The bunker industry, that's got to be a huge hoax. I could go to Mark Zuckerberg and be like, look, if you want to survive the coming end days, I'm going to need about $500 million, and I'll dig you a deep hole. And this is what they're really doing. They're investing into bunkers, but what are they investing into bunkers for? Like, what are they trying to protect themselves from? If there's nothing that could possibly destroy the world, if weapons of mass destruction are a hoax, if alien invasions are fake, if there are no planet killer asteroids, if World War III civil war is not coming, why do you need a bunker? It's a scam. That's what it is. But I think it's a scam that could be sold to very wealthy people. Another one, I wouldn't be shocked if Musk was already selling tickets to having people's consciousness digitally uploaded post-mortem. Like, yeah, you don't have to die. I can sell you immortality. You just got to give me your life savings upon death, and then we'll transfer your consciousness to this junk drive, and I'll plug it into the sim. How different is that than selling indulgences, than the church and simony, the various ways of bilking the rich for better seats in heaven? Well, they're bilking the rich for better seats on Mars. Bach Precision says Musk is just a modern day P.T. Barnum. Yeah, exactly. There's a sucker born every minute. The grift has got to be so deep. I mean, it's not just us at the very bottom of the pyramid here. And imagine being that rich and believing this stuff. Like, you would invest into all kinds of ridiculous things. Okay, so we were talking about the $21 trillion city for the rich and powerful. Now, it can't just be rich and powerful. Who's going to mop the floors? Who's going to do all the labor? So it's going to have to be rich and powerful and then a bunch of poor people. Or it could be that the poor people are already there, Martian slaves. So this underground city could be a Mars base. All right, let's move on here. I saw this video and I would say this is sad. I think this video I'm about to play here is sad. A lot of people are impressed by it. But this is a child describing how the Mandela effect works. And his father, I'm assuming it's his dad, is encouraging this. And I'm going to go through some of the comments, and you can see that nobody is finding this objectionable.
The Mandela effect and how the particle accelerator altered the weight of one electron and therefore destroyed our universe and shifted us into the universe that's directly next to it, and therefore things are different in this universe.
So you believe that this thing that some people call the Mandela effect is actually real?
Oh, it's absolutely real.
Can you describe what it is for people who've never heard of it?
Oh, because this kid certainly remembers Nelson Mandela dying in the 80s. This kid certainly remembers Ed McMahon passing out big checks. I'm sure he remembers Lassie, where Timmy fell down the well.
Before?
Sure, so the Mandela effect is the effect of some people thought at a certain time, and other people remember it as different. A lot of other things, Star Wars, classic videos, Mirror, Mirror on the Wall. Everybody knows that. Well, if you actually look back to the original film, it's not Mirror, Mirror on the Wall. It's Magic Mirror on the Wall. And some people actually...
Which, of course, it's not.
It's not,
in
right.
the reality I grew up in.
Right, exactly. In an alternate expansion of our universes. Even in my own scientific notes, I've found...
This is Mandela effect grooming. This kid has scientific notes about how Snow White changed. Like this is what's bizarre about this one, is that if he watched Snow White, he would have received the version that exists right now. He's not old enough to have remembered the version of it where the lines were slightly different that the Mandela effectees claim to remember. And there is this thing that explains the Mandela effect. It's very simple. It's called the misinformation effect. It's not something that you can choose not to believe in. Like, I don't believe in the misinformation effect. Sorry. The misinformation effect is an observed phenomenon. It's repeatable, it's testable, it's very well understood. And it has to do with the manner in which our memories are affected by the context in which they are recalled. Every time somebody does a Mandela effect quiz, when they ask somebody, do you remember A or B? They're contaminating A, the original memory, with B. And the more you do it, and the more someone actually thinks about it, here's what happens. You're thinking about something that doesn't exist. Well, you're not remembering, you're imagining. What's the difference between remembering and imagining? They're kind of similar. You're recalling something from your mind or generating something from your mind. When somebody says something, your imagination gets prompted. Imagine a pink elephant. Now, if you can imagine a pink elephant and hold that in your head, that's not a memory. That's an imagining. It's a construct. Every Mandela effect that somebody, quote, recalls is a construct. It's a pink elephant. It's something that they were prompted, sort of like text prompts that create images with Midjourney. You write a sentence, describe something, and then it generates the image of it. Words to image. Same thing. somebody can speak these words and your imagination is prompted. Well, these prompted artifacts can become conflated with the memory through the misinformation effect. This explains all Mandela effects, and this technique also, or this process explains faulty eyewitness testimony that has many people locked up for crimes they didn't commit. Look into the Innocence Project and the research that went into uncovering how faulty eyewitness testimony gets people convicted and how that eyewitness testimony is the result of the interrogator bias or the interrogation process. Every Mandela effect conversation is an interrogation. Do you remember A or B? Do you remember this? Do you remember that? That process creates the false memories if it's done improperly. This is why the Innocence Project exists, because they found so many people were locked up based on bad testimony. Mandela affected people are giving you bad testimony because of retroactive interference with their memories, misinformation effect caused by the Mandela effect proponent. So this child is brainwashed. She's reciting stuff.
Rewritten signatures and things that are a little bit different from originally what I wrote.
So how did that actually happen? Let's take your notebook, or let's take Mirror, Mirror on the Wall, like an old film, animated film. How did it actually change?
Well, it never changed. We changed. You see, we were moving relative to our universe, and then our universe destroyed. So now the universe moved, well...
Okay, so the kid is saying that our universe was destroyed by CERN, and we moved into the next door universe. This is padded room talk. This child is being, I would say, messed with mentally by his father here. And again, I went through this whole thing. I think it's pretty pathetic. But I thought this is interesting simply for the fact that I thought the Mandela effect was going to die off. I thought if Ryan Stavely doesn't hold a conference and start insisting on being fruitful and multiplying, their faith is going to die off, because that's how religions propagate. They pass it on to their kids. Religion is something that you inherit for the most part. Or and in this case, same thing. It's like, well, Mandela effect requires that you've experienced these certain cultural artifacts, and there are no new Mandela effects. This kid is too young to have recalled the time when Ed McMahon was passing out big checks. So I thought the only way that you're ever going to have Mandela effects continue is if the Mandela affected parents brainwash their kids with it. And I used to joke about this. I would say, okay, maybe a Mandela effectee and his girlfriend could raise their children with these various movies from the 80s, and then later tell them, hey, we got to let you know that this changed. Dolly used to have braces. So I could see, like, potentially the ability for parents to brainwash their kids into the Mandela effect cult. And I said the only way the Mandela effect is going to survive is if you guys start replicating and brainwashing your kids. And I said it as a joke. But here you have an adult literally brainwashing his child to believe this crap.
Of infinite number of realities behind it. But what happened was we made this universe sort of out of balance, and our universe,
Because of the collider, the super collider?
Yeah, we altered the way.
So he's being groomed into believing that CERN changed the universe, etc. So there's that. Angst G says, Catherine Austin Fitt is claiming the U.S. government funneled $21 trillion to build a network of 170 underground installations, some under the ocean, allegedly. Definitely more believable than space travel. Exactly. What's more likely? That the billions of dollars we're throwing into deep space is really about sending satellites and probes way out there, hundreds of millions of miles away, or that they're using that money to build underground infrastructure. Like, I think deep space could be beneath our feet. Deep space could just be underground infrastructure. Yeah, exactly, HG. Like H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. We are the Morlocks, or maybe the Morlocks are already there. So in the time machine in the future, there's a split between the elite and the masses, the Eloi on the surface. The masses go underground, and they become these monsters, the Morlocks. And that does, and don't the, wait, I have to double check this. I believe the Morlocks worship a nuclear missile, a nuclear warhead. And that might be the reason they went underground. Oh, no, that was Planet of the Apes. I've got to go through and look at this. So, yeah, in Planet of the Apes, the Alpha Omega bomb destroyed the Earth by igniting the atmosphere, which is what Oppenheimer had feared would happen. But I remember there was a scene where they're underground, they worship this thing like an obelisk. Portal Complex says, research Crater Earth. Crater Earth, I've heard about that. It's just the same thing as the dome Earth. The problem with anybody promoting a model is they're all the same. Crater Earth equals globe Earth, equals flat Earth, equals video game Earth. Anybody pushing a model is suspect. It's like, how do you arrive at this without taking a leap of faith? You might believe it, but there's nothing to substantiate that. It's way too early to start positing various models. And the domed flat Earth thing has been discredited, although that has just caused its believers to believe we're in a video game Earth, which is not unpopular. Simulation theory, the idea we're in a video game, has been pushed quite heavily, and I would argue that it's another one of these intelligence operations. Mandela effects, chemtrails, UFOs, these are intelligence operations, in my view. The purpose of which, again, it's to keep us all guardrailed in a particular box. The idea of having a model first is unscientific also. I mean, you can have a theory, a hypothesis, you can test something, but if you're not going to do the testing, then you can't promote your model. Not until you've done some testing. And the best that we have is Jaron going to Antarctica, which takes out the straw man flat Earth model, but doesn't answer any of the questions that the flat Earth question actually raises. Because to me, the flat Earth topic was never about geography. It was always about worldview and how you arrive at a worldview and the capacity of a media monopoly to deceive the multitudes. That's the real question. And so many people in this area are not willing to go do the legwork to justify their claims. Like, I was always disappointed that Mark Sargent never went to the dome to get a chunk of dome glass. G says, don't bring up Captain Lou. Well, Captain Lou is an interesting character. He went to high school, I believe, with Mike Massissimo, one of the astronauts. And his view is that there's more land, and that is, he calls it a crater, but it's kind of a misnomer because a crater would presume a big rock from space fell and made a hole. But no, it's more like a crater from a volcanic eruption of mud or something, and this is just the residue. This is the form it takes. We've got like a ridge around us or something. And again, it's all interesting as a theory of science fiction. But if you really had this inkling that I can prove the world is very different from what they say, then where's the action to back that up? And pushing models is like pushing religions. Like, my God's right. No, his God is wrong. My God's right. You know, these various religions compete over whose God is correct, who's got the best God, the best version of history, whose myths are true. And if you're fighting over myths, you're just lost in that morass of subjectivity. And I'd say that the globe model is just as valid as Crater Earth, is just as valid as video game Earth, meaning they're all equally invalid. Mount Crushmore says, what do you think about the lack of parallax in Antarctica? Look, when Jaron got off the plane and he starts walking around Antarctica, he's like, ha, 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 look at that mountain. It's 10 miles away, but it looks like I could just touch it. Same with the glacier. Everybody's saying that. Everything is so close up to us, but it's so far away. I'm like, how does that make sense? I thought, well, maybe they're in a room and they're looking at screens like the Mandalorian. And I haven't ruled that out. Honestly, no matter how mad they get. And I don't really think of scientists as mad people. I usually think of them as objective, dispassionate, unattached to any model, but focusing on where the data leads them. But these Globers go down to Antarctica and they come back furious, angry. They're not happy and celebrating that they solved something. No, they're mad that people are accusing them of fabricating it. But they gave us every reason to think so. You had Witsit Spitsit vaping in the camera, pretending it's his breath. And then you've got Jaron and others talking about how close all the background features around them looked. And yeah, I thought there was a lot of questionable stuff about it. And I'm not denying the existence of Antarctica. However, did they go to the South Pole or the designated South Pole on a bigger plane? Can you reconcile that with their observations? Well, if you trust their observations, no. And they did use the sun and a magnifying glass to burn some paper to prove it was the sun. But is any of this evidence? And I would say no. Because if it was fake, and this is just hypothetical, if the final experiment was fake, then we can conclude a few things. If it was faked, it was done by NASA. If it was done by NASA, it had NASA's budget. What couldn't you fake with $1 billion per day? There were other things as well that were brought up throughout this event, and all they can do is attack and ridicule the non-believers, which is, I think, the wrong way to go. Non-believers are skeptics. Maybe if they had shown us some penguins. And one more point about the final experiment. That was not scientific. It was not a scientific expedition because they were too biased. And also, there were other incentives for what they did. There's financial incentives. McToon admits, or actually I saw it, they were taking bets. They were betting Bitcoin on the results. Like, scientists don't bet on the results of their experiments unless they're climate change scientists. And they know there's a reward for validating the establishment's version of things. So no, I'm actually just going to say it. Experiment was probably fake. And even if it wasn't fake, it's inadmissible as evidence. Like, it was a waste of time. And they didn't even get to see any penguins. Okay, let's continue. We were talking about the Mandela effect. I could look at the comments here if you want to see some of them. They're pretty bad. Very few people. Oh, look at this person said, I asked ChatGPT make a wall from Disney's 1937. It's spoken by the Queen. Interesting. Brothers Grimm, the line is magic mirror on the wall, so Disney slightly altered it. No, it's the Mandela effect. Dodo Photo says, this kid's going to grow up to be such a C with parents telling him how brilliant he is for his mid-wit takes. Quote, am I misremembering small details about trademarks? No, the universe has shifted me into an alternate one. If your kid is Mandela affected, they don't ever have to contend with wrong answers. No, teacher, I didn't misspell dilemma. The universe changed. Added the extra M. What was the other one? Oh, yeah. South America used to be directly beneath North America, then it moved. But the parents in this case are brainwashing their kid. I don't think it's that serious. He probably doesn't really believe it. You know, you have parents teaching their kids to recite the Constitution or the state capitals. You know, it doesn't affect them long term. It's just the parent is using exploiting the child. But these people are so willing to just believe this stuff. Daily Grind says, this kid sure knows his quantum entanglement. I can't believe I saw this today. Quantum entanglement. And one of the big hoaxes of our time, or misconceptions, is the double slit experiment. So many people will say, of course reality is subjective because the double slit experiment. Okay, well, 1 minute you're saying that you can't trust the scientists. The next minute you're citing scientific experiments that are being misrepresented. The double slit experiment does not prove anything. It's a misunderstanding to say that the observer determines wave or particle, the observer being a human observer. No, it's not referring to a person. It's been taken out of context. The 100th monkey syndrome, where one monkey figures out that you can wash the mud off this thing and eat it, then all the other monkeys figure it out at the same time. That's also fake. There's no 100th monkey. There's no double slit. And there is another one that I often hear. A few of these trutherisms being passed around, it's predictable. Anybody who believes in simulation theory is going to cite the double slit experiment wrongly. I'll have to put out an article to correct the record on that. Okay, let's see what we have here. Now, this is sad. Christina says, I wish I was on a timeline where my daughter was still with me. This timeline is painful. She would be turning 19 next month. So that explains part of the reason that people believe. I want to believe reality's fake because reality is so painful. In fact, there's a movie called Mandela Effect where the main character loses his mind because of a tragedy. And that's the reason why he had this split. So I would argue that religion preys upon the vulnerable and the weak. And Mandela Effect is a religious concept. People who can't confront reality, give them something to give them hope. Smart Kid says, Lux Magus, all realities exist. Just because one path is chosen doesn't mean it destroys everything. Nothing's destroyed. Different timelines. Okay, let's see what else. She's a vet says, no, the CIA's changing the details and scrubbing the internet so the population will question itself when it decides to fight the government for all their corruption. Half right. There is to conclude that the Mandela Effect is an active measure. It's a psyop. Yes, it's a psyop, but they're not actually altering anything. The Mandela affected people's observations are not valid. The Mandela effect is real because it's a real psyop, but the effect is 100% in the minds of the believers. There are no objective evidences of Mandela effects. Moving on. Michael says, this is spicy science stuff to distract you from having a connection with God. Well, I would say that this is a new iteration of an older concept. Trutherism is a religion. Alternate spirituality has itself become a different religion, an alternate religion. And I've been identifying various facets of it, but trutherism, conspiracy theory does come attached to a lot of replacements for things that would really fall into the purview of religion. Aliens are angels, for example. The Mandela effect is a miracle. If anything, you could describe it as a miracle, the miraculous. But they are given an alternate spirituality. Okay, let's move on. We're talking about Epstein, nothing burgers. Somebody asked Donald Trump if he minds that people are offended that he dressed up like the Pope for that picture. And he says that no, the Catholics loved it. The only people that were offended were the media. Probably true. But think about how insensitive that really is, considering, the Pope just dies, and before he's even interred, Trump's already tweeting this picture. The outrage is largely manufactured. The people who are pretending to be offended probably didn't even care about the Pope. Organoids. This is new. World's first bioprocessor. The world's first bioprocessor organoids can live for 100 days. What are we looking at here? We're looking at these devices that are fused with organic brain matter. Silicon chips can last years, sometimes decades. The neuronal structures that form bioprocessors have lifespans also, but only for several months. So this article here is about how you can use these human brain organoids and have them merge with the microchips. So cyborg is what we're talking about. Something to look forward to. Our eventual replacements. Some robot with a brain at some point in the future will be handling a lot of the jobs that we pay minimum wage workers to do. JT33 says, I know it was Skip peanut butter. Well, it's Jif or Jiffy, right? Jif or Jiffy, they'll say. It's always one or the other. It's never a third option. One of the ways that I can debunk the Mandela effect is just pointing out how every single alleged Mandela effect is a binary. I thought we were living with a universe that is splitting into multiples. But how come there's only one alternate version for every Mandela effect? Sebas says, do you think the controllers know the shape, Tim? I'm with you. That shape is not the territory. It's a good question. I would say that when we say the controllers, we're talking about the programming class. And the programming class, I think, is largely programmed. So the programmed is the box, the mainstream mediation. And if you haven't rejected that, you're in it. It's an active process to reject it, to become what I would say the non-believer off-world stage, deprogrammed. But the program exists within this big box, and the programming class is on top of it. But I would say that the programmers are mostly programmed, meaning they're only let in on secrets that are relevant to their particular department. So the people who are involved in fake school shootings don't know space is fake. The people who know space is fake likely don't know the full extent. So it's got to be very controlled as to who knows the ultimate truth behind the big lies. But the existence of the big lies and the attempts to guardrail the truth is evidence that there is something being hidden. So how many people know what that is? It's a good question. Kate Perry, what does she know? Well, she knows space travel's fake, but does she know what's behind it? And it could honestly just be a spinning ball going around the sun, heliocentric style. Sure, that doesn't bother me. But that does not explain why what we have been shown is all cartoon, CGI, artist renditions. So my Occam's razor approach here would say that if the world is a ball, they're hiding continents. And the space program is designed to give us a limited view. Sort of like the media programs your worldview with a false history, a very myopic version of events. So you have a very limited version of the world thanks to mass media mind control. Well, why would the maps be any different? Why would cartography be exempt from deception? The same rationale that they apply toward manipulating your worldview could be applied towards manipulating the world itself. So the Earth could be 25% bigger than they say and have more land where the rulers live, and we're quarantined. So they're hiding something. They're either hiding more land, a bigger ball, or the fact that shape is not even a concept to bring into the subject of cosmology. Maybe it's not that relevant. Deprogrammed Truther says, it's very interesting how these things keep coming up over and over. Chemtrails in the news, Mandela effect in the news. Oh, yeah. I have so many chemtrail cultists hitting me up, and they're saying, it's true. The news in the UK admitted that they're chemtrailing us. Okay, so now you believe the news. You never believed them before, but now you believe them. No, they want you to believe in chemtrails if you don't believe in climate change. But I see a lot of people running around like it's a win. Like, we did it. We proved them wrong. They had to admit it. We forced their hand. Chemtrails are real. No, chemtrails do not exist. They admitted that geoengineering is a hypothetical solution they might have to use, but it's hypothetical. It's a hypothetical solution to a hypothetical problem. Geoengineering is a buzzword that truthers are throwing around. They have no clue what it means. It's actually sad. If you're still thinking that geoengineering is a secret weather manipulation program, then Alex Jones has been spiking your Kool-Aid there in Alex Jonestown with something, Mentonol. The concept of geoengineering is a series of hypothetical proposed solutions to climate change. So to even talk about geoengineering, you have to accept the premise of climate change. I don't. But if you're talking about geoengineering, you therefore accept the premise. And what is that premise? That man is altering the weather. So the climate change people are mad at man because man's screwing up Gaia. But they blame the private sector. The chemtrail cultists are mad because man is screwing up the weather. But who do they blame? The secret government. It's a bifurcated psyop, very low-level stuff, but the only reason it's popularized is because you've got intelligence agents promulgating this stuff, and they're being promoted. Chemtrails are more popular than media fakery analysis for a reason. Portal says, the technique of mass bombardment of fear from the newsbenders. Remember, people fear what they don't understand. Correct. Portal says, is Israel real? You know, I think it's safe to say at this point that the world stage, as I describe the model, our internal concept of the world, is an apt description for how things work. That we live on a movie set. It's a magic show, but it is a movie set. And we have raised so many valid doubts. We have debunked so many claims that at this point, everything is subject to the same level of scrutiny, and you're not under any obligation to believe anything what you're told. But I never go so far as to say that these things just simply don't exist. Like, we're not denying reality. We're denying the interpretation. One of the big traps that most truthers fall for is they start to see that there's unreality coming out of the screen. The news seems fake. There's too many coincidences, too many times where life follows art. So what do? They say nothing's real. Everything's a simulation. That means that you lost the game. If your conclusion after looking at fake news is that reality is fake, they got you. They broke your mind. They split your mind. You've had a schizoid break from reality. If you can look in the mirror and say to yourself, I don't know what's real. I can't tell real from fake. I think this is all an illusion. You haven't achieved something. You did not ascend to some mountain where you're enlightened and above us. If you think nothing's real, you're in a padded cell. They got you. They screwed up your mind. They screwed up your operating system. That should not be the conclusion we arrive at, that nothing is real. And there are people who just flippantly say North Korea is fake. There's no such thing. I'm sorry, but that's not a valid statement. A valid statement would be questioning the details and getting to what we can know and separating that from what is merely conjecture. But to throw all of it away and say nothing is real is going too far. And Occam's razor, what's more likely? The news is fake or reality's fake? Ask your simulation friends this. What's more likely? News is fake or reality is fake? And simulation people will say reality's fake. Well, then why do you care about the news? Why do you hold the news to an objective standard if you're saying that reality has no objectivity? And if they can't reconcile that, they're broken machines and you can't trust what they say because they admit that they are confused about everything in their existence and they can't tell real from fake. And that's fine. You can go down that route and you can be just as lost as the mainstreamers, like that security guard who accurately discerned that Trump faked the assassination attempt, but can't figure out how they did the rest of it. And so assumes the rest of it is real. He's like the guy at the magic show who thinks that there was some magic and then a lot of tricks. And the magic was the stuff he couldn't figure out. Like, no, that's not a logical way to look at magic shows. You go to a magic show knowing it's all fake, but knowing that it's designed to trick you. The media is the same thing. If you can't debunk something, it just means you don't have enough information. You don't need to default to believing it. But similarly, disbelieving something without adequate grounds for dismissing the concept, without reason, is fallacious. So auto believers, people who automatically believe, are doing it wrong. Auto disbelievers, the people who say nothing is real, are also doing it wrong. And that really comes from jumping to conclusions instead of suspending judgment. Like, wait to believe till you get more facts. Don't believe the headlines. Also, don't just automatically disbelieve the headlines. You need more information. Case in point, this incident with the playground. When I first saw it, I'm like, okay, it seems real. It's believable. People do act out like this. But let's look at the broader context. So people immediately reacted to it. Anger or support for the woman, giving her money. People took sides on the premise that it was real. Now they can fight over it. I said, let's wait. And so we waited a couple days, and what did we find? The main actor is connected to Dr. Beast. The other actor, the guy who filmed the thing, is some predator who got out of jail free. The event has been juxtaposed by every mainstream source with the Austin Metcalf thing. So sometimes it takes a few days to get enough information to understand what you're looking at. All right, moving on. Marcus says, Palestine. Yes, Palestine is real. After 10/7, I stopped caring about that conflict. I don't care about Israel or Gaza. I don't care about Palestinians. I don't care about Israelis. I don't care. After 10/7, I realized that the PSYOP entertainment complex is everywhere. Each side is going to lie to the other side. Each side is going to prop up fake victims. And then the public watching is going to conflate video game footage with war footage. Nobody has an objective grasp. I see a video with 20 babies on the street, on the sidewalk, lined up like sardines. Mouths closed, eyes closed, people mourning. I'm like, yep, these people got bombed by the Jews. These babies were bombed. I'm sorry, but what kind of bombs can kill babies without waking them up, without damaging their clothes, without ripping their little bodies apart? These babies are like dolls with their eyes closed. And if you've ever seen a corpse, somebody who's killed or dies in a wreck, somebody who's not dying in their sleep, their facial expressions are a little distorted. Their eyes are open. Dehydration causes the eyelids to pop open. The jaws, the mouth of a body has to be sewed closed. I've done many. You sew them closed, or you use the little needle injector and you wire the mouth shut. Otherwise, it's just wide open. So I was noticing all these dead kids are fake. I called this out. I said, look at the eyes, look at the mouths. There's no way these things were killed by bombs. These are just dummies. And then one article from one side calls the other side out for using dummies. And then later they do a fact correction, say, no, it wasn't a dummy. So like, wait a minute here. We're arguing over whose dead bodies are real. So we're not in a position to get emotionally entangled in something that nobody has a firm grasp on. There's no, what is it? The first casualty of war is the truth. And we're in a psi war. So you're not going to catch me advocating for any class of victims or taking sides and against an alleged oppressor. I've noticed a lot of people commenting on alt woke and noticing these connections, and it's true. And I was like, I think I was the first one to really draw attention to it, but now it's kind of a popular talking point, is that there is a mirror here between the critical race theory version of everything, where whites and whiteness rule the world with systemic racism. And then on the other side of the fence, they say, no, Jewishness rules the world with systemic Jewishness. So critical race theory and critical Jew theory are identical grievance-based politics with scapegoats. Each side claims that it's being genocided. Each side claims the other side is genociding them. So the whites are like, the Jews are genociding us. I'm like, wait a minute here. You're almost the same thing, but you have different villains in your little stories. Woke and alt woke. And with everything else, if it's a mirror, if it's a bifurcated psyop, if both sides agree, but they just blame each other, it's a hoax. HG says, Tim, as a death industry worker, how likely is Weekend at Bernie's? Well, rigor mortis would prevent a lot of the stuff, but you can break the rigor. You see, like when somebody comes in, you pull them out of the refrigerator, their arms are going to be at whatever position they were when they die. And in order to get their hands to fold over their stomach, rest, make them look like they're comfortable, you have to, what we call break the rigor. So you got to take the arm and extend it and then close it back, extend it, close it back. You got to move the limbs around in order to break the rigor. But once you do that, you can reconfigure them a little bit. So Weekend at Bernie's could happen. Some of the problems would be if it were to fall over or lean over the stomach contents. And that's another thing I've noticed is when I look at bodies in these various events, the way that they handle the corpses, some of it seems like they're dealing with dummies. They're not dealing with the reality of a corpse. But Weekend at Bernie's, is it a viable thing? I'd have to rewatch it. Very grotesque. All right, let's continue. I'm going through my notes here. We've talked about the Pope being protected by God from AI. We talked about the underground Mars bases. Canada, mass censorship coming to Canada. It's going to get really bad. They're going to be censoring the internet for Canada because of all the racism, misogyny, and hate. Disease X. As I said, Elon Musk is opening the floodgates to what? The 4chan stuff. All the stuff that the mainstream is going to be in support of censoring. Misogyny, any kind of racial stuff, hate. Yeah, absolutely. That is Disease X. The rage virus, the mind viruses that turn one part of the population against another. And we're just waiting for the trigger here. And this was alluded to on the Alex Jones show by Tucker Carlson. They were hanging out together, and Tucker said, I'm making a prediction. There's going to be a false flag where somebody is going to commit an anti-racist terror attack. And he alluded to Patriot Front. So what that means is Patriot Front is like the KKK. And if he's saying that they're going to get mowed down by some BLM, then that's what he's describing as a false flag. That could be the type of escalation that would justify censorship. What's interesting about this whole scenario, though, is that movie with Michael B. Johnson, Sinners, that came out ends in the scene where he mows down the Klan. So that's the movie that mirrors the Austin Metcalf stabbing. The narrative mirrors the psyop of the day, especially this Shiloh Hendricks, this race war talk, people calling Shiloh versus Carmelo and these competing give, send, goes, a proxy race war. So it all fits. Are we waiting for some terror attack coming from the left against the Patriot Front, deeper incitements? It seems so. Thank you, Marcel. Nero Jack, Meowry, Wes Skeptical, Todd Jones, Conscious Reality have all received the blue wrench. By the way, we will be taking calls tonight. The IPS Morning Deprogram is really just to set the stage for whatever we're going to talk about later. But there's still a lot happening and still a ton of things to talk about here. But the IPS Morning Deprogram has been a plan of mine for some time. I thought we need to do a twice a day thing. And also, the Discord server is active again. So we are in Discord. Go to ips.monster to get the link. And what I'm doing is I'm planning our Discord chat. And there's a scheduler in there. So if you go into the Discord, you'll see what time we have these scheduled chats for. And I'm also going to send those out via newsletter. We want to be in the voice chat when anything happens. And we have to be 24/7, boots on the ground. We have to be watching everything. And these live streams are great. The live chats are great. But having these background and these behind the scenes think tanks has always been productive. Gilded is great. But Discord has better features when it comes to the voice chat and everything else. So we have there. John Francis says, before Convid, I was MAGA, and no MAGA are the same. I was lucky to find a group of truthers this past 5 years, but if I question the narrative, they can be vitriolic. Yeah, truthers are, unfortunately, it's almost like they're victims of mind control. They are. The red pills are all toxic, and they have been fed a steady diet of agitprop and paranoia. And it has become also infused with religiosity. Religious people get violent or get angry and vitriolic. Religious people get mad because their beliefs are fragile. If somebody tells you that the sky isn't blue, you're not going to get mad about it because it's self-evidently not true. But beliefs that aren't self-evidently true are vulnerable to criticism. And you can tell also that when people acquire their beliefs emotionally, that it's a little more difficult to get them to let that go. Because like you challenge the belief and all the emotions that went into it rise to the surface. Like I'm not emotional about this stuff. If you could convince me that I'm wrong and that the media doesn't lie and that everybody in the world is completely honest, hey, I'd be happy. I'd sleep. I'd have other things to do. Like I'm not married to a belief system. What we offer here is an operating system. Two different things. One is a methodology, and the other is a set of prescribed talking points and beliefs. No, we are deliberately fomenting a culture of non-belief here. In a world of believers in subjective belief systems, we stand out as, I think, to many of them, as inexplicable. How can you not believe? You must believe in something. People used to say that. How can you not believe? If you don't believe in God, then how come you're not just doing bad things? Well, I never really liked that idea that were it not for religion, we would all be bad. Were it not for government, we would all be criminals. Like, I don't think that's not how I operate anyway. I can think for myself, but I think a lot of people are afraid of those who think for themselves. You're a threat to the collective. I mean, look at how religions treat apostates versus non-believers or the heathens. So the heathens are better than apostates. The apostate is somebody who was part of your cult, but then they left. So now they prove to the cult that it's possible to leave and the cult can be challenged. So apostates are dealt with harshly to set an example. If you try to leave and weaken the integrity of the collective, this is what will happen to you. The individual is a sacrificial, expendable unit. And the sole value of the individual is what they bring to the group. So the collective is always not only angry at the ones who leave, but they're scared of the non-believers who could threaten their whole belief system. And that's why they go to ad hominem, which means to the man. Chemtrail people cannot sit down and have a rational conversation. Think about that. I'm a rational person. I can have a rational conversation with you about anything, literally. But a chemtrail believer, a cultist, cannot sit down and have a 5-minute conversation about it rationally without attacking you or getting into some kind of defensive posture. And that's typical of belief systems. It's the same with religion. It's the religiosity of the truther is what I'm commenting on. And again, I'm not a truther. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. This is the off-world stage perspective. I'm not taking sides. And taking sides does not give you the moral high ground. For those who try to agitate for activism, just because you're shouting in the street, pretend you're performatively fighting the power, does not give you a moral high ground. In fact, it reveals you to be a useful stooge. All right, thanks for joining. I'll send out live stream notifications this evening when we're opening phones. This is One-Eyed Jack and the Murder Hornets, Dawn of a New Day. See you in Discord.
better.